Hello everyone, this is the Quest for Health YouTube channel with Brother Ra'ai Malak, and in today's video we are going to talk about a form of bacteria called mycoplasma. Weaponized and patented by the US government, this bacteria strand has been found to be the leading cause of many deadly diseases that are plaguing us today. In my last video, we talked about the history of biological warfare on Americans by the US government. And now we're going to touch on exactly what these biological agents are, how they attack the body, and what we can do to defend ourselves against them. So with that being said, let's get started. Mycoplasma, the most common Lyme co-infection. This is just one of the many diseases caused by mycoplasma. There are many more discussed in this particular article. I'll also be posting the link to this information down in the description box for those of you who want to examine it yourself. But moving on. Mycoplasma is the stealthiest of all stealth microbes. It may be a major player in many chronic diseases associated with aging, but remarkably, most people, including most doctors, have limited awareness of it. If you have Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, autoimmune disease, or possibly any other chronic illness, however, it is a microbe you should know about. Mycoplasma is the smallest of all bacteria. 4,000 of them can fit inside one red blood cell in your body. Only 10 to 15 of average-sized bacteria would fit. It is a parasite. It cannot live without a host. Unlike other bacteria, mycoplasmas do not have a protective cell wall. This interesting strategy of survival allows them to change their shape and fit into areas where other bacteria cannot go. It also allows them to slip inside cells of the host. Not having a cell wall makes mycoplasma completely resistant to many types of antibiotics. So just want to point out that this is because most antibiotics today are only designed to take out normal bacteria with cell walls. But as we can see, there is nothing normal about mycoplasma at all. Okay? If you go to Google and type mycoplasma patent, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. Here is the patent for a weaponized strand of mycoplasma called M. fermentans incognitus that was invented by the US government. Okay? Here it is, right here. Publication number, US 5242820A. Publication type, grant. Application number, it's all here, okay? This was a patented, this was a disease, not a disease, but this form of bacteria was patented and invented by the US government. The inventors, Shi Ching Lo, original assay, the company who funded this and backed this, the American Registry of Pathology. Okay? So, and when you actually go through this document, you see how they actually discuss using it, how they went about creating it, and they also touch on briefly how it can also be used in vaccines. to so-called protect people against mycoplasma infections. And I'm not going to read all of this, okay? But the link will be in the description box if you want to check it out yourself, okay? So getting back to the article here, there are over 200 known types of mycoplasma, and probably many yet to be discovered, that can infect both animals and plants. It is highly adaptable and can jump species and adapt to new hosts very readily. Okay, there are at least 23 different varieties of mycoplasma that can infect humans. Okay, so mycoplasma is the name of the type of bacteria, okay, that have no cell wall, and there are many different types of mycoplasma. Okay, so there are different species or different varieties of mycoplasma, but mycoplasma is the name you would use to define this particular group of bacteria. Okay, moving on. A few of them are considered harmless normal flora, but most have potential to cause disease. Mycoplasma are spread by biting insects. Now pay attention to this closely here, because I'm going to link this in with some other information that will help you to see exactly what's going on here. Mycoplasma are spread by biting insects, ticks, mosquitoes, fleas, biting flies, sexual contact, contaminated food, and airborne droplets. Most everyone has been exposed to some form of mycoplasma. Mycoplasma have been closely linked to many chronic degenerative diseases. Okay? So I want to point out something to you real quick. In another article that I have here for you, I want to point out the similarities of how these mycoplasma spread in our environment with the experiments that the government are actually doing. Covert testing, if it says right here, covert testing of mycoplasma, testing the dispersal methods. Documented evidence proves that the biological weapons they were developing were tested on the public in various communities without their knowledge or consent. The government knew that crystalline brucella, which is another form of mycoplasma, one of the other species of it, would cause disease in humans. Now they needed to determine how it would spread and the best way to disperse it. They tested dispersal methods for Brucella suis and Brucella melitensis at Dungway Proving Ground, Utah, in June and September 1952. Probably 100% of us now are infected with Brucella suis and Brucella melitensis. Other government documents recommended the genesis of open-air vulnerability tests and covert research and development programs to be conducted by the Army and supported by the Central Intelligence Agency. At the time, the government of Canada was asked by the US government to cooperate in testing weaponized brucella, and Canada cooperated fully with the United States. The US government wanted to determine whether mosquitoes would carry the disease and also if the air would carry it. A government report stated, open air testing of infectious biological agents is considered essential to the ultimate understanding of biological warfare potentialities because of the many unknown factors affecting the degradation of microorganisms in the atmosphere. So what are one of the ways mycoplasma spreads? As we saw in our other article, by biting insects. And what is one of the ways that the government is testing the spread of biological agents that they know to be pathological and that cause diseases? Through the mosquitoes. Let's see what they're doing here. Testing via mosquito vector in Punta Gorda, Florida. A report from the New Zealand Journal of Medicine reveals that one of the first outbreaks of chronic fatigue syndrome was in Punta Gorda, Florida, back in 1957. It was a strange coincidence that a week before these people came down with chronic fatigue syndrome, there was a huge influx of mosquitoes. The National Institutes of Health claimed that the mosquitoes came from a forest fire 30 miles away. The truth is that those mosquitoes were infected in Canada by Dr. Gulliford B. Reed at Queen's University. They were bred in Belleville, Ontario, and taken down to Punta Gorda and released there. Within a week, the first 5 cases ever of chronic fatigue syndrome were reported to the local clinic in Punta Gorda. The cases kept coming until finally 450 people were ill with the disease. Okay? Testing via mosquito vector in Ontario. The government of Canada had established the Dominion Parasite Laboratory in Belleville, Ontario, where it raised 100 million mosquitoes a month. These were shipped to Queen's University and certain other facilities to be infected with this crystalline disease agent. The mosquitoes were then let loose in certain communities in the middle of the night so that the researchers could determine how many people will become ill with chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, which was the first disease to show. One of the communities they tested it on was St. Lawrence Seaway Valley, all the way from Kingston to Cornwall in 1984. They let out hundreds of millions of infected mosquitoes. Over 700 people in the next 4 or 5 weeks developed myalgic whatever this word is, or chronic fatigue syndrome. Okay? So this is what's going on. Okay, these are deliberate attacks on the U.S. public with weaponized bacteria that they created. Okay, it's biowarfare, and these are the direct similarities between how mycoplasma is documented to spread in our environment with exactly and showing exactly the process of exactly how this is actually happening, or the hand behind, okay, the spread of mycoplasma within our communities. Okay, so there you have it. These are just some of the ways the government is spreading this highly pathogenic form of bacteria. And that's not including chemtrails and vaccines. But what I want to point out is the clear connection between these experiments and the rise of disease almost immediately afterwards within the general public. Anyone suffering from chronic fatigue should take heed to this information. We didn't come down with these disorders organically or because we have some sort of genetic mutation. These things were bioattacks targeted to incapacitate and weaken the individual on purpose. These chronic degenerative diseases that many of us are suffering from should be looked at in a different light. It's not just chronic fatigue, multiple sclerosis, arthritis, diabetes, Lyme disease, Crohn's disease, autoimmune disease, and Alzheimer's. These are the names they like to give us on the surface, but underneath, the underlying cause of all of these diseases are indeed nothing more than a bacterial Then bacterial infections caused by highly pathogenic weaponized forms of Mycoplasma bacteria. So in treating these conditions, we should now understand that we need to take the same approach one would in treating bacterial infections with natural with natural forms of antibiotics. Okay, and we will discuss that in more detail if we have time. Okay, so moving back to the article here. Mycoplasma is a master of manipulating and outmaneuvering the host immune system. Half of its genetic makeup is devoted to that exclusive purpose. It has little ability to cause direct harm to the host, but it can use the host's immune function to its own advantage. Everything that the bacteria needs for survival, vitamins, minerals, fats, carbohydrates, and amino acids must be scavenged from the host. It makes nothing itself. Okay? So these things are like parasites. They feed on what you feed on, taking away your energy. Okay? They feed on what you feed on. So just take note of that. To gain access to needed resources, mycoplasma generate inflammation in the body by manipulating the signaling mechanisms of the immune system called cytokines. Inflammation breaks down tissues and allows the bacteria to gain access to the host's resources. Mitochondria are prime targets for energy. Fatigue is always a factor in mycoplasma infections. Mycoplasmas favor infecting the cells of tissues that line different areas of the body. Okay. Mycoplasmas favor infecting the cells of tissue that line in different areas of the body. Okay, so these things can get into many different parts of the body. Okay, common sites of infection include nasal passages, sinuses, lungs, the lining of the intestinal tract, the genital tract, vesicles inside the brain, synovial lining of joints. They also commonly infect white blood cells, red blood cells, and brain tissue. Okay, different mycoplasma have preference for certain tissues, but all mycoplasma species possess the ability to infect any type of tissue in all organ systems. Okay, so these things are attacking different body organs, different parts of the body, and especially the brain, causing different types of neurological disorders in people. Depression, mood swings, all different types of brain problems. Now, let's move to the next passage. The most common mycoplasma pneumonia, has preference for lung tissue. Now, pay attention to this here. Initial infection with mycoplasma pneumonia typically causes pharyngitis, sore throat, cough, fever, headache, malaise, rhinitis, runny nose, all the common symptoms of basic upper respiratory infection. Okay. Now, I wanted to point that out because I wanted you to focus on that because I wanted to point out an article here. Obama signs executive order to allow detention of Americans with respiratory illness. Okay. Now, this was back in 2014. Okay. But as we see, mycoplasma create conditions within the upper respiratory system, and they create infections. And now the government can detain those who show signs of disease Okay, so they created the problem and they bring forth the solution. And you can check this article out in more if you want to check out the entire article. It'll also be in the description box below. Okay. But I just wanted to show you the link here between the diseases they're causing, and now that these things are becoming epidemics, and now that these diseases are becoming so prevalent within society, they can now become a national threat. Okay, and through the Department of Homeland Security, they can quarantine those that they feel are a threat to the population, to the United States government. So moving on, okay. If a person's immune system is not full strength, it can progress to bronchitis and even pneumonia. About 20% of pneumonias. The type of pneumonia caused by mycoplasma, often called walking pneumonia. It's rarely severe enough to result in hospitalization, though it can drag for weeks or even months. Clearing of respiratory symptoms, however, may not be the end of the story. After mycoplasma enters the body through a preferred infection site, it also infects white blood cells. Once inside a white blood cell, it can be carried to all parts of the body and infect other tissues and organs. Okay, so this is pure evil. Okay, pure evil. This is why we need prayer. This is why we need the Most High in these last times, these end times. And once again, like I mentioned in my last video, this information is meant to help you, not to scare you. And as believers, because we understand that no weapon formed against us shall prosper. Okay, so now that we know what now that we know a little bit more about mycoplasma and some of the things that it causes, some of the diseases that it is related to, we can now, okay, being educated, move on to figuring out the things that we need to do to heal ourselves. Okay, so we're going to stop right here and continue in the next video that will be part two of this series. Okay, understanding mycoplasma. So if you found this video helpful, feel free to thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Once again, all praise to Ahai Bashem Yeshaya and Shalom.